12 doctors couldn't deliver the billionaire's triplets until a poor cleaner walked in and did. The miracle in room 402. The sound of a heart monitor flatlining is a sound that no amount of money can silence. In the ultra-exclusive VIP wing of St. Jude's Hospital, the air was usually scented with fresh lavender and the quiet hum of central air conditioning. But tonight it smelled of sharp antiseptic and terror. Marcus Sterling stood in the corner of the room, his knuckles white as he gripped the back of a leather guest chair. He was a man who moved mountains with a phone call, a billionaire whose tech empire spanned 3 continents. Yet, standing in his Italian silk suit, watching his wife writhe in agony on the bed, he felt like the poorest, most powerless man on earth. "Her blood pressure is spiking! We need to stabilize her now!" Dr. Harrison barked, his voice cutting through the panic. Harrison was the chief of obstetrics, a man whose wall was covered in diplomas from Harvard and Yale. He was flanked by 11 other specialists, anesthesiologists, pediatricians, and nurses, all creating a wall of white coats around the bed. Aaliyah, Marcus's wife, let out a guttural scream that tore at Marcus's soul. She was small, exhausted, and terrified. The labor had been stalled for 14 hours. The triplets, their miracle babies, were in distress. "Mr. Sterling, you might want to step out," one of the nurses said, her voice trembling slightly. "I am not going anywhere," Marcus growled, his eyes fixed on Aaliyah. He rushed to her side, grabbing her hand. It was cold and clammy. "I'm here, Allie. I'm right here. Breathe." I can't," Aaliyah gasped, her eyes rolling back slightly. "They're stuck, Marcus. I can feel them. They're hurting. The fetal heart rates are dropping," Dr. Harrison announced, checking the monitors. His face was a mask of clinical detachment, but sweat beaded on his forehead. "We can't wait anymore. Prepping for emergency C-section. Get the OR ready. This is high risk." "No!" Aaliyah sobbed, clutching her belly. You said I might not survive the anesthesia. My heart condition. It's the only way to save the babies, Mrs. Sterling," Harrison snapped, losing his patience. The room descended into organized chaos. Metal trays clattered, nurses shouted vitals, and the machines screamed their rhythmic warnings. Beep, 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 faster and faster. In the midst of this whirlwind of high-tech medicine and high-stakes panic, the heavy oak door creaked open. Nobody looked. Nobody cared. It was just the help. Sarah Jenkins pushed her yellow mop bucket into the room. She was a woman in her late 50s, her graying hair tucked neatly under a hairnet, her blue uniform faded from countless washes. She had been invisible in this hospital for 20 years, wiping up spills, emptying trash, and mopping the floors of the wealthy. She was supposed to clean the spills in the adjacent bathroom, but she stopped. She didn't look at the floor. She looked at the woman in the bed. Sarah felt the energy in the room before she heard the words. It was a thick, suffocating cloud of fear. The doctors were fighting the body, not working with it. She saw Aaliyah's back arching, fighting the pain, her body locked in a cycle of panic that was constricting the babies. "Get that woman out of here!" Dr. Harrison shouted without looking up, noticing the movement in his peripheral vision. "This is a sterile field! Security!" Sarah didn't move. She didn't leave. Instead, she let go of her mop handle. It clattered against the plastic bucket, a sharp sound that momentarily broke the rhythm of the shouting. With a gait that was slow and deliberate, Sarah walked past the millions of dollars of medical equipment. She walked past the billionaire in his $5,000 suit. She walked right up to the bed. "Hey!" a nurse shouted, reaching out to grab her. "You can't be here!" Sarah gently but firmly brushed the nurse's hand away. The strength in her calloused fingers was surprising. She looked at Aaliyah, ignoring the doctors entirely. "Look at me, child," Sarah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had a resonance that cut through the noise of the machines. It was a voice of the earth, deep and grounding. Aaliyah, eyes wide with panic, locked gazes with the cleaner. "They are scared because you are scared," Sarah whispered, placing a rough, warm hand on Aaliyah's forehead. "You are fighting the river. You have to float." Doctor Harrison, remove her! Marcus shouted, stepping forward, torn between his protective instinct and the strange, sudden calm that radiated from the woman. Hush now, Papa, Sarah said, not even looking at Marcus. Unless you want to pull these babies out yourself, you hush. The authority in her voice stunned Marcus into silence. It was the tone of a grandmother who had seen everything. Sarah moved her hands down to Aaliyah's stomach. She didn't press or prod like the doctors. She simply held the weight of the belly, closing her eyes. She began to hum. It was a low, rhythmic melody, something ancient, sounding like a lullaby from a village thousands of miles away. She is shifting the baby's position, Dr. Harrison scoffed. That's dangerous. Get security up here now. Wait, Marcus whispered. He was watching the monitor. As Sarah hummed, the frantic, jagged lines on the heart monitor began to smooth out. The screaming beep, beep, beep slowed to a steady, rhythmic pulse. Shoulders down, Sarah commanded softly to Aaliyah. Open your hands. Let the pain flow through you, not against you. Aaliyah exhaled, a long, shuddering breath she had been holding for hours. Her body went limp against the pillows. Now, Sarah whispered, sensing the contraction before the machines did. Push with the song, not with the fear. Aaliyah gripped Sarah's forearm, digging her nails into the older woman's skin, but Sarah didn't flinch. She just kept humming, rocking her body slightly in time with Aaliyah's breathing. I see the head, a nurse gasped, shocked. The first one is coming! Dr. Harrison stood frozen, his scalpel for the C-section hovering uselessly in the air. Nature had taken over. Minutes later, the room was filled not with the sound of alarms, but with a sharp, clear cry. The first baby. A boy. Sarah caught him before the doctor could even step in, her hands moving with practiced, fluid grace. She placed him instantly on Aaliyah's chest. 1, Sarah whispered. 10 minutes later, the second cry. A girl. 2. And finally, the third. Another boy. 3. The room fell into a stunned silence. The monitors were green. The mother was breathing steadily, tears streaming down her face, but she was alive. The babies were pink and squirming. Sarah grabbed a sterile towel and began wiping the babies down, swaddling them with a speed and tenderness that the nurses couldn't match. She wasn't just cleaning them, she was welcoming them. Marcus stood paralyzed. He looked at the 12 doctors, the best money could buy, standing around with their mouths open, their expensive tools useless in their hands. Then he looked at the woman in the faded blue uniform, smelling of bleach and hard work, who was currently cooing at his newborn son. The scene froze in his mind. Aaliyah, glowing with a relief that transcended words, holding 3 bundles of life. And beside her, Sarah, the cleaner, looking not like a servant, but like a queen in disguise. Dr. Harrison cleared his throat, trying to regain his dignity. Well, a fortunate coincidence. The oxytocin levels likely spiked. Marcus turned slowly to the doctor. Get out! Excuse me, Mr. Sterling. Get out, Marcus said, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. All of you, leave us. As the medical team shuffled out, confused and embarrassed, Marcus walked over to the bed. He looked at Sarah, who was adjusting the blanket around the smallest baby. Who are you? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked up, her eyes crinkling with a tired smile. Just the cleaner, sir. I'll get my mop now. I imagine I'm in a bit of trouble. The unspoken bond. The days following the birth were supposed to be a time of celebration. But in the Sterling VIP suite, a new battle was brewing. The triplets, named Leo, Maya, and Julian, were healthy, but they were incredibly sensitive. It was as if the trauma of the difficult birth had left an imprint on their nervous systems. They cried incessantly. The hospital assigned 3 dedicated neonatal nurses to the room, women with decades of experience and crisp white uniforms. They followed charts. They measured milliliters of milk. They checked temperatures every hour, but whenever they picked the babies up, the crying intensified. The infants would stiffen, their tiny faces turning red with distress. "They are colicky," Dr. Harrison explained during his rounds, maintaining his professional distance. "It's common with multiples. We can prescribe a mild sedative." "No sedatives," Marcus said, rubbing his temples. He hadn't slept in 3 days. He was pacing the room, watching a nurse try to rock little Maya. The baby was screaming, her fists clenched. "Give her to me," Aaliyah whispered from the bed. She was recovering well, but she was weak. When she held them, they calmed down slightly, but she couldn't hold all 3 at once, and she needed to rest. Marcus felt helpless again. He watched the nurse place Maya back in the bassinet, the baby still wailing. Then there was a knock at the door, a hesitant, soft knock. "Come in," Marcus called out. The door opened and Sarah stood there. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She was back in her blue janitor's uniform, holding a trash bag. "Excuse me, sir," she said, keeping her eyes down. "Just here to empty the bins. The regular staff is on break." As soon as Sarah spoke, the room changed. Little Leo, who had been whimpering in the corner bassinet, stopped. He turned his tiny head toward the sound of her voice. Marcus saw it. He saw the recognition. "Leave the trash," Marcus said. Sarah froze. "Sir, I can come back later if—" "No," Marcus walked over to her. "Put the bag down, please." Confused, Sarah dropped the trash bag. Marcus gestured to the screaming Maya. Would you mind?" Sarah looked at the nurse, who scoffed audibly. "Mr. Sterling, this is highly against protocol. She hasn't scrubbed in. She's wearing a utility uniform." "I don't care about the protocol," Marcus snapped. He looked at Sarah with pleading eyes. "Help her." Sarah wiped her hands on her apron. She walked over to the bassinet. She didn't pick the baby up immediately. She warmed her hands by rubbing them together first. Then she leaned down and made a clicking sound with her tongue. Tsk, 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 a rhythmic, soothing beat. She scooped Maya up. She didn't hold the baby flat like the nurses did. She held the baby upright, pressed firmly against her chest, right where her heartbeat was strongest. She began to sway, not from the knees, but from the hips, a rolling motion. Maya's scream cut off instantly. The baby let out a long sigh and melted into Sarah's shoulder. The silence in the room was deafening. "How do you do that?" the nurse asked, offended. "She just wanted to hear a heart," Sarah said softly. "The plastic beds are cold. She spent 9 months listening to a rhythm. She needs the rhythm back." Marcus stared at her. He realized then that he had been looking at the world through the wrong lens. He thought medicine was science. He was learning that healing was an art. "Sarah," Marcus said, testing the name he had seen on her ID badge, "you're done cleaning floors." Sarah looked up, alarmed. "Sir, I need this job. My husband, he's in a wheelchair and—" "I'm not firing you," Marcus interrupted, his voice softening. "I'm hiring you. I want you to stay here, with them, with my wife. Whatever the hospital pays you, I'll triple it. I'll multiply it by 10. Just don't leave." Sarah looked at the baby in her arms, then at the exhausted Aaliyah in the bed. She saw the desperation in the billionaire's eyes. It wasn't money she saw. It was fear. "I don't need 10 times the money, sir," Sarah said quietly. "But I'll stay for the little ones. They have strong spirits, but they need grounding." For the next week, the VIP suite transformed. It stopped looking like a hospital room and started feeling like a home. Sarah took control, but in a way that was invisible. She brought in dried lavender from her own garden to mask the antiseptic smell. She brewed a special tea from ginger and fenugreek for Aaliyah to help with milk production, something the doctors said was old wives' tales, until they saw Aaliyah's supply double overnight. Marcus found himself spending less time on his laptop and more time watching Sarah. He watched how she folded the blankets, tighter, like a cocoon. He listened to the stories she told the babies, stories about the moon and the wind, not from books, but from memory. He began to see the woman beneath the uniform. He learned she had 5 children of her own, all grown. He learned she had been a midwife in a rural village in Jamaica before moving to the States for a better life that ended up involving a mop bucket. One evening, Marcus was sitting by the window, watching the city lights. Sarah was rocking Julian, humming that same melody from the delivery room. "You saved them," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "That night, the doctors, they were going to cut her open. You saved them." "The doctors know books," Sarah said, not stopping her rocking. "But books don't scream in pain. Sometimes you have to listen to the person, not the machine." "I've spent my whole life trusting data," Marcus confessed, looking at his hands. "I thought I could control everything, but when Ali was screaming, I was useless. All my money, useless." "Money builds the house, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said gently. "But love warms the inside. You aren't useless. You love them. That's the fire. I'm just tending the hearth." It was a moment of profound connection. The barriers of class and race dissolved in the quiet sanctuary of the room. Marcus felt a respect for this woman that he rarely felt for his board members or competitors. But peace, in the Sterling world, was fragile. The door swung open with force. The spell was broken. "Marcus!" a sharp, aristocratic voice rang out. Walking in was Victoria Sterling, Marcus's mother. She was draped in cashmere and pearls, holding a designer handbag like a weapon. She looked around the room with a critical sneer, her eyes landing immediately on Sarah. Sarah was sitting in the expensive leather armchair, her feet up on a stool, at Marcus's insistence, holding the Sterling heir. Victoria's face twisted in disgust. "What on earth is going on here? Why is the janitor holding my grandson?" Marcus stood up, his posture stiffening. "Mother, this is Sarah. She is helping us." "Helping?" Victoria laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "We have the best nannies from the Royal Institute flying in tomorrow. Why is this woman touching the baby? Is she even sanitary? Has she been vetted?" Sarah stood up slowly, lowering her head in a conditioned response to authority, preparing to hand the baby over. "Keep him, Sarah," Marcus commanded, his voice hard. He turned to his mother. "She stays. She is the reason your grandchildren are sleeping." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She looked at Sarah not as a person, but as a stain on a pristine white shirt. She saw the bond forming, the way Aaliyah smiled at Sarah, the way Marcus defended her, and she hated it. "We'll see about that," Victoria murmured, clutching her pearls. "We simply cannot have strangers influencing the children, Marcus. You don't know where she comes from. You don't know what she wants." The air in the room grew cold again. Sarah held the baby tighter, sensing the shift. The calm was over. The storm had just walked through the door. The diamond trap. The transition from the sterile walls of St. Jude's Hospital to the sprawling gated estate of the Sterling Mansion was supposed to be a triumphant return. The residence was an architectural marvel of glass and steel, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was a house designed for magazine covers, not for sticky fingers or spilled milk. For the first week, however, the cold architecture was warmed by Sarah's presence. She had moved into the guest wing, a space larger than her entire apartment building. Yet she spent all her time in the nursery, a room Marcus had outfitted with the latest technology, humidity-controlled cribs, biometric sensors, and cashmere drapery. Sarah ignored the technology. She opened the windows to let the sea breeze in. She sang songs that didn't rhyme, but held a rhythm that made the triplets' eyes heavy. But Victoria Sterling was watching. Like a hawk circling a field mouse, she observed every interaction. To Victoria, Sarah was an infection. She was a reminder of a world the Sterlings had ascended above, a world of poverty, manual labor, and unrefined habits. Every time Aaliyah laughed at one of Sarah's stories, Victoria's jaw tightened. Every time Marcus asked Sarah for advice, instead of the expensive pediatric consultants, Victoria felt her control slipping. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Victoria had organized a welcome home viewing for the city's elite. It was a small gathering of socialites, investors, and family friends intended to show off the heirs to the Sterling Empire. "She cannot be in the room, Marcus," Victoria hissed in the hallway, adjusting the diamond brooch on her lapel. "The governor's wife is coming. We cannot have a cleaner in a polyester uniform handing her the baby. It's embarrassing." "She is part of the family now, Mother," Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. He was tired, caught between his gratitude for Sarah and the lifelong pressure of his mother's expectations. "She is an employee, and a temporary one at that," Victoria snapped. "If you won't handle it, I will." The party was a display of excess. Champagne flowed, and the triplets were paraded around like trophies. They were calm, mostly because Sarah was standing just behind the velvet curtains, humming softly so they could hear her presence. Victoria saw this. She saw Sarah hovering, and she made her move. Earlier that morning, Victoria had gone into her private vault and retrieved the sterling star, a vintage diamond bracelet worth $250,000. It was an heirloom meant to be passed down to the first granddaughter. As the guests moved to the patio for appetizers, Victoria slipped into the staff quarters. Her heart didn't race. She had done this before with maids who became too familiar. She found Sarah's worn canvas tote bag, the one she used to carry her Bible and her herbs. Victoria checked the hallway. Empty. She unclasped the bracelet and dropped it deep into the side pocket of the bag. An hour later, chaos erupted. "My bracelet!" Victoria's scream shattered the polite conversation in the living room. "The sterling star! It's gone!" The music stopped. Marcus rushed to his mother's side. "Are you sure? Did you take it off?" "I left it on the vanity in the nursery just for a moment to adjust my dress," Victoria cried, squeezing out a tear. "It's gone, Marcus. Someone stole it." She turned her eyes slowly, deliberately toward Sarah, who was standing quietly in the corner holding little Leo. "We need to search the staff," Victoria declared, her voice trembling with staged outrage. "Immediately." "Mother, that's absurd," Marcus began, but the social pressure was immense. The guests were whispering. Security was called. The head of security, a man named Miller, began searching coats and bags. Sarah stood stoically, clutching her tote bag. She knew. As soon as Victoria's eyes had locked onto her, she knew. This was the way of the world she had lived in for 60 years. The rich didn't need a reason to crush the poor. They only needed an excuse. "Ma'am, I need to check your bag," Miller said to Sarah. "I didn't take anything," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. She looked at Marcus. "Mr. Sterling, you know I wouldn't." Marcus looked at her. He wanted to believe her. He remembered the hospital room, but he also saw his mother's hysterics and the logic of the situation. Who else would take it? "Just let him check, Sarah," Marcus said softly. "It will clear your name." Miller opened the canvas tote. He moved aside a worn Bible and a bag of dried chamomile. Then, he pulled out the glittering diamond bracelet. The room gasped. Aaliyah covered her mouth with her hand. "I knew it!" Victoria shrieked. "A thief! A common thief! We invite her into our home, we trust her with our children, and she robs us blind!" Marcus stared at the diamonds dangling from the security guard's hand. The evidence was physical. It was undeniable. His heart sank. He felt a deep sense of betrayal. He had trusted her. "Sarah," Marcus choked out. "Why?" Sarah didn't defend herself. She knew that in a court of their opinion, her word was worth less than the dirt on their shoes. She looked at Aaliyah, then at Marcus. "I did not take that," Sarah said, her voice quiet but possessing a terrifying dignity. "But I see that I cannot stay where I am not trusted." "Call the police," Victoria demanded. "No," Marcus said, raising his hand. He couldn't bear to see the woman who saved his children in handcuffs. "Just leave. Get your things and leave. Now." Sarah nodded slowly. She walked over to the bassinet where Maya and Julian lay. She placed a hand on their chests one last time. "Be good, little angels," she whispered. "The world is cold, but you are warm." She picked up her canvas bag, leaving the bracelet on the table. She walked past the gaping guests, past a triumphant Victoria, and past a heartbroken Marcus. As the heavy front door clicked shut behind her, a silence fell over the room. And then, almost instantly, the crying began. It started as a whimper from Leo, then a wail from Maya, and finally a scream from Julian. It was a sound of pure abandonment, the silence of the mansion. 7 days. That was how long it took for the Sterling Empire to crumble from the inside. The mansion, usually a place of light and music, had become a tomb. The curtains were drawn. The staff walked on tiptoes, terrified of making a sound that might trigger another meltdown. But the meltdown was perpetual. Since the moment Sarah left, the triplets had not slept for more than 45 minutes at a time. They rejected the bottle. They rejected the expensive ergonomic swings. They rejected the 3 new nannies Victoria had hired from the prestigious Royal Care Agency. These new nannies were certified experts. They wore crisp uniforms and spoke in hushed British accents. They had degrees in child development, but they were mechanical. They treated the babies like biological equations to be solved, not souls to be soothed. "He's refusing the formula again," Nanny Claire said, frustration leaking into her voice as she tried to feed Julian. The baby was arching his back, his face beet red, screaming until he gagged. Aaliyah sat on the floor of the nursery, rocking back and forth. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes sunken with dark circles. She was slipping away. The postpartum depression, held at bay by Sarah's herbal teas and emotional support, had returned with a vengeance. "He wants Sarah," Aaliyah whispered, her voice cracking. "They all want Sarah." "Nonsense," Victoria said, marching into the room. She looked impeccable, refusing to let the chaos affect her appearance. "They are just adjusting. Babies cry, Aaliyah. You need to be stronger. Stop romanticizing that criminal." Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his family disintegrate. He looked at his son, Julian. The baby had lost weight. His ribs were showing slightly when he breathed. The doctors had been called 3 times. Dr. Harrison had prescribed an anti-reflux medication and suggested a lactose-free formula, but nothing worked. The problem wasn't their stomachs, it was their hearts. "I can't take this," Marcus muttered. He turned and walked to his study, slamming the door to shut out the sound of the screaming. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hand shaking. He felt like a failure. He had billions in the bank, yet he couldn't stop his children from crying. He sat at his massive oak desk, staring at the wall of security monitors. He needed to find a solution. He needed to understand what had gone wrong. His mind drifted back to the theft. It didn't make sense. Sarah had been so humble. She had refused his offer of triple pay initially. Why would she steal a bracelet she couldn't even sell without getting caught? Paranoia, fueled by exhaustion, took over. Did she steal anything else? Marcus pulled up the security archives. System, access camera 4B, staff hallway, date, Tuesday the 14th. He wanted to see if Sarah had rummaged through other rooms before the party. He fast-forwarded through the footage. He saw the staff cleaning. He saw the caterers setting up. Then, at 10:14 a.m., he saw his mother. Marcus froze. He leaned in closer to the high-definition screen. On the video, Victoria looked left, then right. She was holding something glittering in her hand, the Sterling Star. She walked over to the coat rack where Sarah's distinct canvas tote was hanging. With a quick, practiced motion, she slipped the bracelet into the side pocket of the bag. She patted the bag, smoothed her dress, and walked away with a satisfied smirk on her face. Marcus stopped the video. He played it again and again. The glass of whiskey slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The sound didn't register. All he could feel was a cold, sick knot in his stomach. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a setup. His own mother, the woman who preached about honor and lineage, had framed an innocent woman. She had deprived his dying children of the only comfort they knew, all because of her classist vanity. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had kicked Sarah out. He had humiliated her. He had chosen the lie over the truth because the lie wore diamonds and the truth wore a cleaning uniform. He stood up, his chair crashing backward. A fury, hotter than anything he had ever felt in boardrooms or negotiations, surged through his veins. He didn't just need Sarah back because the babies were crying. He needed her back because he had sinned against her. He began to type furiously on his keyboard, pulling up the employment file he had created for Sarah. He needed her address. He needed to know who she really was. He opened the background check file that his security team had compiled, but he had never bothered to read in detail. Name: Sarah Jenkins. Place of birth: St. Anne, Jamaica. Previous occupation: certified midwife, 30 years experience. Delivered over 2,000 babies. Notes: immigrated to the U.S. 5 years ago after losing her home in a hurricane. Husband paralyzed in construction accident. Currently works 2 jobs to pay for his physical therapy. Marcus read the lines through blurred vision. She wasn't just a cleaner. She was a master of her craft who had fallen on hard times. She was supporting a paralyzed husband, and he had treated her like a thief. The screaming from the nursery drifted down the hallway, louder now, desperate. It sounded like a siren. Marcus grabbed his car keys. He didn't call his driver. He didn't check his suit. He ran out of the study, past the shocked staff, and out the front door. He had to fix this. But as he revved the engine of his sports car, a terrifying thought gripped him. What if it's too late? What if she won't come back? He peeled out of the driveway, leaving the gates open, racing toward the part of the city that people like Victoria Sterling pretended didn't exist. He was going to the slums. He was going to find the queen he had banished. The humble queen. The GPS on the dashboard of the Bugatti glowed with a soft blue light, a stark contrast to the grim reality outside the windshield. Marcus Sterling had driven into a part of the city that didn't appear on his investment portfolios. The streetlights here were broken, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked pavement. Trash lined the gutters, and the buildings were huddled together, wearing their peeling paint like old, bruised skin. Marcus parked his multi-million-dollar car in front of a tenement building that looked as if it were held together by hope and rust. He didn't lock the car. He didn't care if it was there when he came back. Rain began to fall, a cold, gray drizzle that soaked through his custom Italian suit the moment he stepped out. He checked the address on the file again. Apartment 4C. He ran inside, the smell of damp concrete and old cooking oil hitting him. There was no elevator. He climbed the stairs, his expensive leather shoes clicking loudly on the worn linoleum. First floor, second floor, third floor. By the 4th floor, he was breathless, not from exertion, but from the weight of his own shame. He stood before door 4C. The paint was chipping, revealing layers of blue and yellow underneath. He raised his hand to knock, and for the first time in his life, the billionaire hesitated. He was terrified of the woman on the other side. He knocked. 3 sharp raps. Silence. Then the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The chain rattled. The door creaked open just a crack. A pair of tired, guarded eyes peered out. It wasn't Sarah. It was a young man, perhaps 20, with Sarah's eyes but a hardened expression. "Yeah?" the young man asked, eyeing Marcus's suit with suspicion. "I need to see Sarah Jenkins," Marcus said, the rain dripping from his hair. "Please, it's urgent. She's not working today," the young man said, starting to close the door. "And we don't buy whatever you're selling." "I'm not selling anything," Marcus shouted, jamming his foot in the door. It was an aggressive move, born of desperation. "I'm Marcus Sterling. Please, I need to speak to her." The name registered. The young man's face twisted into anger. "Sterling? The man who called my mother a thief?" "David, who is it?" A voice came from deep inside the apartment. The door opened wider, revealing Sarah. She was wearing a simple house dress, holding a warm compress. Behind her, Marcus could see a small, cramped living room. In the corner sat a man in an old manual wheelchair, her husband, watching a small television. The poverty was evident, but so was the dignity. The room was spotless, filled with the smell of baking bread and warmth. Sarah froze when she saw Marcus. She didn't bow, she didn't smile. She looked at him with a disappointment that cut deeper than anger. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "you are a long way from the ocean." "Sarah," Marcus breathed, stepping into the hallway but not daring to enter the apartment. "I was wrong. You were wrong about a lot of things," David spat, moving to protect his mother. "Hush, David," Sarah said gently. She looked at Marcus. "Why are you here, sir? Did you come to arrest me yourself?" "I saw the video," Marcus said, his voice breaking. He dropped to his knees, right there on the dirty hallway floor of the tenement building. He didn't care about the suit. He didn't care about the neighbors peeking out. "I saw the security footage. I saw my mother put the bracelet in your bag." Sarah let out a long, shaky breath. Her shoulders dropped. The vindication was sweet, but it didn't fix the hurt. "I am so sorry," Marcus wept, looking up at her. "I was blind. I let my pride and my mother's poison ruin the only good thing that has entered our home. I fired you, and I broke my own family." "Get up, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "You don't kneel to me." "I am begging you," Marcus continued, ignoring her command. "The babies, they won't eat. They won't sleep. Julian is wasting away. Aaliyah hasn't spoken in 2 days. The house is dying, Sarah. We are dying without you." Sarah looked at the desperate man. She looked at his wet hair, his shaking hands. She saw the father, not the billionaire. "You accused her of stealing." The husband in the wheelchair spoke up, his voice raspy but strong. "She cried for 3 nights, not for the job, but because she couldn't say goodbye to those children." "I know," Marcus sobbed. "I can never make it up to you. But if you have any mercy, please come back, not as a maid, not as an employee, as the grandmother they need." Sarah looked back at her husband. He gave a small, singular nod. She turned back to Marcus. She reached out her hand, the hand that had scrubbed floors and delivered babies, and touched his shoulder. "Get up, Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Dry your eyes. Tears won't feed a hungry baby." Marcus stood up, wiping his face. "Will you come? Those angels called my spirit before they were even born," Sarah said, grabbing her shawl from the hook. "I can't leave them in the dark." The drive back to the mansion was a blur of speed. Marcus drove like a man possessed, weaving through traffic, but this time, the silence in the car was companionable. Sarah sat in the passenger seat of the Bugatti, clutching her Bible, praying softly. When they pulled up to the iron gates of the Sterling estate, it was evening. The house looked ominous, dark except for the lights in the nursery window. They burst through the front doors. The sound of screaming hit them instantly. It was a raw, exhausted sound, the sound of infants who had given up on comfort and were crying from pure instinct. They ran up the marble stairs. Marcus threw open the nursery doors. The scene was apocalyptic. 2 nannies were trying to force-feed a screaming Leo. Aaliyah was curled in a ball on the rug, covering her ears, rocking back and forth in a trance. Victoria Sterling was standing by the window on the phone, looking annoyed. "I don't care what it costs, just get a sedative prescribed," Victoria was shouting into her phone. "Stop!" Marcus roared, his voice shaking the walls. Everyone froze. Victoria turned around, her eyes widening as she saw Sarah standing next to Marcus. "You brought her back?" Victoria gasped, hanging up the phone. "Marcus, have you lost your mind? She is a thief." "Be quiet, Mother," Marcus said. His voice was deadly calm. "One more word, and I will have security remove you." Sarah didn't wait for the politics. She moved. She walked straight to the cribs. She didn't look at the nannies. She just clapped her hands twice, loud, sharp claps to break the pattern of the screaming. "I am here," Sarah announced. Her voice filled the room, warm and commanding. "Grandma is here." She reached into the crib and picked up Julian, who was purple from crying. She pressed him to her chest. She reached out and touched Leo's cheek. She nodded to Maya. She began to hum. It was the same song, the song of the earth, the song of the river. The effect was instantaneous. It was spiritual. Julian's body, rigid with stress, melted against her. His breathing hitched, then slowed. He smelled her scent, soap and sage, and he knew he was safe. The other two babies, hearing the change in the room, stopped screaming and started whimpering, waiting for their turn. Aaliyah looked up from the floor. Through her haze of depression, she saw the silhouette of the woman who had saved her life. "Sarah," Aaliyah whispered. "I've got them, child," Sarah said, rocking Julian and reaching a hand out to Aaliyah. "I've got them. You can rest now." Aaliyah crawled across the rug and wrapped her arms around Sarah's legs, sobbing with relief. Sarah stood there, a pillar of strength, holding the baby and the mother, anchoring the entire family. Marcus watched, tears streaming down his face again. He turned to his mother. Victoria looked pale. She saw the video file Marcus was holding up on his phone, the footage of her planting the bracelet. "Marcus, Victoria stammered. "I did it for the family. She doesn't belong with us." "You nearly killed my children with your pride," Marcus said, stepping close to her. "You are leaving, now. You will go to the summer house in the Hamptons, and you will stay there. If you try to contact us, if you try to come near Sarah or my children, I will release this video to the press. You will be ruined." "You wouldn't," Victoria whispered. "Look at my wife," Marcus pointed to Aaliyah on the floor. "Look at my son. Try me." Victoria looked at the hatred in her son's eyes and knew she had lost. She gathered her purse and walked out of the nursery, her heels clicking away into irrelevance. Epilogue. 5 years later. The sun was setting over the Sterling estate, but the house was no longer cold. The garden, once manicured and forbidden, was now a chaotic playground of toys, tricycles, and laughter. A large picnic blanket was spread out on the grass. Marcus sat with his tie loosened, laughing as a 5-year-old Leo tried to tackle him. Aaliyah looked healthy and radiant, pouring lemonade. But the center of gravity was the woman sitting in the rocking chair on the porch. Sarah Jenkins, now Sarah Sterling Jenkins, the director of the Sterling Foundation for Maternal Health, watched them with a smile. Her hair was completely white now, silver like a crown. "Grandma, watch this!" Maya shouted, doing a clumsy cartwheel on the grass. "Beautiful, my love! Strong legs!" Sarah called out, clapping her hands. A black car pulled up the driveway. It was David, Sarah's son, now the head of IT for Marcus's company. He helped his father, Sarah's husband, out of the car. The wheelchair ramp Marcus had installed made it easy for him to join the family on the porch. Marcus walked up to the porch and sat on the steps at Sarah's feet. "They are happy," Marcus said, looking at the triplets running in the golden light. "They are loved," Sarah corrected him, resting her hand on his head. "That is the only wealth that matters." Marcus took her hand, the rough, calloused hand that had once held a mop, and kissed it. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saving us." Sarah smiled, looking at the horizon where the sun kissed the ocean. She hummed a few notes of an old melody. "We just did what needed doing, Marcus. We just let the river flow."